The Boy Who Reversed Himself by William Sleator, 14. I tried to cheat at first, playing dumb, until Ramoon figured out how to motivate me. I couldn't help being impressed when I got my first good look at the maze. Ramoon's force-based brain had to be pretty formidable for him to have designed and constructed something this complicated so quickly. It was built inside a hypercube. It seemed to be about 30 feet on a side, riddled with snarled corridors and ramps, blind corners and dead ends. It was far worse than the hedge mazes I had encountered at home, which were easy enough to get lost in, despite the fact that they were essentially only two-dimensional problems. This one went in three directions, mazes piled on top of mazes, devilishly confusing, especially since, being inside a hypercube, the walls stood up in the Ana and Kata direction, which meant that even out here in force space, the person inside it could not see over them. Ramoon plucked Pete out of the cage. While he was moving him, I took a hasty look at the structure through the trinoculars. Without them, I could see nothing but fragmented cross-sections of it. He pushed Pete inside one of the two openings in the maze, then closed it off. Now there was only one way out. I quickly pushed the trinoculars back on top of my head again before Ramoon looked back at me. This is a game, Ramoon thought at us. The one on the outside must tell the one on the inside how to get out of the box. If you do it very quickly, I will give you some nice food. Start now. Hurry, Laura! Pete shouted on at me. Which way? It was easy to hear him, since some boundary cubes were missing from the hypercube. The maze was the force-based equivalent of an open box. It was a clever test, since the walls were open-topped. Since the walls inside the open-topped maze went in the Ana and Kata direction, and since the cage was hung above the maze in the Ana direction with the trinoculars on, I could look down into it and see the way out quite clearly. I was like one of those people sitting on an elevated chair in the middle of a hedge maze who can see the whole thing and give directions to the seriously lost. Only with instructions from me would Pete be able to get out without wandering around for hours and hours. And then Ramoon would know that we could understand his instructions. He would know we were intelligent and had our own language, and he would know that we could give complicated directions about how to get from one place to another. If Ramoon knew those things about us, he would also know that he could force us to help him find where we had come from. But Ramoon wasn't going to know any of that if I could help it. I can't, Pete, I called down to him. The Trinox perched it on the top of my head. I'm afraid you're going to be in there for a while. What's the matter with you? He screamed and swore at me. And then I heard his delicate little footfalls as he started down a corridor. Of course, my natural impulse was to watch Pete and tell him how to get out of the maze, but I fought against it. I had to act stupid and ruin Ramoon's experiment. That would prove to him that we had no language, no intelligence, and could not help him find where we had come from. And then he might leave us alone and eventually forget about us. After that, if we were lucky, we might be able to sneak away without being followed. It was our only chance of getting home without endangering our universe. And maybe I could really carry it off. I began to let myself hope. It's not working, Ramoon. Gigigi seemed to feel as pleased about that as I was. The one Ana is doing nothing. Maddening, perverse creatures. Do not blame them, Ramoon, if they are not what you want them to be, and do not get angry at them, or you will what, Twisted One? You cannot stop me. Here, little obsolete thing. You wear them like this. He reached in and none too gently adjusted the trinox over my eyes. Then he plunked me down on the edge of the open cage, my feet dangling into empty space, and pointed my head Ana down at the maze. He repeated his instructions. I saw now that the maze was not simple and unadorned like a purely businesslike rat maze at home. It was intricately carved with curving, curlicued lintels over the doorways and turrets and pointed archways and balconies, and with railings that had faces sculpted in them. It was as elaborately detailed as a mosque, like something out of a Russian fairy tale. It didn't make sense that Ramoon would go to so much unnecessary trouble just to make it look pretty, but maybe he hadn't. Maybe that was just the way artifacts were in force space, automatically because of the extra dimension. Meanwhile, there was Pete, a flat, transparent thing blundering around inside it, shrinking to a pink line every time he turned to the side. He stopped in a little room with 2 exits. "Help me, Laura! Which way do I go here?" Pete screamed and kicked the wall. I pressed my lips together, fighting the urge to call out to him. "Please, Laura," Pete wailed. "There's something terrible about this place, an evil feeling, please." Maybe if I helped Pete just this once, Ramoom wouldn't notice. I glanced up to check on him and got my first good look at a force-based person through the trinox. I almost screamed. It was so unexpected. Even with all my experience, I could barely make sense out of Ramoom. It was his head that was the problem. A hypersphere, a bulbous shape that curved out and around upon itself in the Anna and Kata directions. Think of it a formed elephant head with 2 flat trunks, both wrapped around it. Think of an octopus tied in knots. Blend them both together. Throw in some pulpy features. The result would be a mild and benign approximation of Ramoon's face. The eyes watched the maze, the third between the Anna and the other 2. Below, and Kata, the eyes sprouted in the pig-like 3-nostriled nose. A double cylindrical mouth stretched around the face in a fixed manic grimace. "Please, Laura, which way?" Pete cried pathetically. I sensed Ramoom's mirth. His monstrous mouth twisted around into a grin. Creases and folds like thick cable sprang out in 3 directions from his lips and eyes. His face was a terrain of troughs and chasms deep enough for me to fall into. I tore my eyes away. I saw how precariously I was hanging Anna above the maze and struggled against dizziness. Pete was turning back and forth in front of the 2 doorways, changing with each movement from a line to a pink flake. "Don't take the ramp!" I screamed at him and pushed the trinox up on top of my head. I heard Pete's feet tapping along the zigzag corridor. A moment later, he reached the next intersection. "Which way now?" He deserved an explanation. "I can't tell you, Pete. Then he'll know we have language. He'll know we can give directions. Then he'll make us help him find 3 space. Let him!" he howled. "Let him help us find 3 space. And get me out of here!" I gritted my teeth. "Little ones do not understand, Ramoom. You make them unhappy, pointlessly. Face the truth, stubborn one. Your precious experiment is a failure. Shut up. It is the one Anna that pretends it does not understand. It must be as perverse and infuriating a creature as you, Gigigi. It needs a tiny touch of persuasion, that's all. What are you doing, Ramoom? Where are you going?" The indistinct bulk of Gigigi ballooned and then shrank away after him. I quickly slipped on the trinox and peered down Kata. I found the exit from the maze and then followed the tilting, crenellated corridors back from it toward Pete, searching for a quick path. It wasn't easy without a pencil to mark the way, but Pete sounded in pretty bad shape, and it wouldn't prove anything to Ramoom if he thought Pete had found the way out on his own without instructions from me. What I didn't want him to know was that we had language. It also occurred to me that it might be to my own advantage to learn the best escape route from the maze. I wondered what Ramoom meant by persuasion. "Okay, Pete, I found it." But I looked up for an instant first. The room seemed crazily distorted through the trinox, full of impossible shapes. But I had enough practice now to be certain that Gigigi and Ramoon were both somewhere else for the moment. "Remember this, Pete, because I'm telling it fast. Take the middle door, then at the next intersection go left, down the ramp, and you'll come to 3 doorways. Take the Anna one." I concentrated, calling out directions to Pete, trying to fix the path in my own mind. "Then take the way that makes a U-turn. When you get to the fork, take the Kata ramp." I was interrupted by the sounds of a struggle and then a heavy thud. "Ramoom, no! Let me in! Unlock this door! You cannot do that thing! Let me in! Please let me in!" What was Ramoom going to do now, without Gigigi to protect us? I pushed the trinox up on my head and stared placidly off into the distance, doing my best to look stupid. Ramoom loomed up in front of me, floating eyes, the bulb of his nose, veiny cross-sections bulging and fussing. "Here is something new for you to admire, clever one." He pushed the trinox roughly down over my eyes again. Ramoom held it gingerly by the tail, a hairy, thrashing thing the size of a large dog. It had 3 little red eyes and lots of curving tusks, and 8 short legs kicking wildly. It emitted a piercing, enraged squeal. It made me think of a wild pig, except that pigs only have hooves, and this thing had 2 front legs equipped with claws. It arched its back, caught one of Ramoom's fingers with a talon, and struck savagely with its head, sinking teeth into flesh. "I, impatient beast!" Ramoon swatted it with one of his other hands and then clamped 2 fingers around its neck to keep it in place. But I can hardly blame it. Do you see how pitifully skinny it is? Ramoon's tone was mocking. The poor little thing is near starvation, I fear. That makes it think quickly when there is fresh meat to be found. You will be amazed at the speed of those little legs. He swung it away from me and dropped it into the middle of the maze. It snorted thickly, its snout scraping the floor. Then it took off fast, heading in the direct route for Pete. And Pete, still following my directions, was running to meet it. No, Pete! He put a pig thing in there! Turn around! I shrieked, trying to find another path. Go back! Take the first door on the left! Then Ramoon lifted Pete out of the cage and set him down next to me. Oh, thank God, I said. He was only... Ramoon pulled the Trinox from my eyes and thrust them at Pete. Now, we mustn't have the stupid little one on top, must we? Oh, no, too dangerous. And then I was swung through the air. Walls sprang up and Anna around me. Ramoon's hand vanished. Not to mention, it is only fair to share the experience. I spun around, frantically scanning the force-face view inside the maze. I couldn't see over the walls, but I could put the interior cross-sections together. I was in a small triangular room with 3 carved doorways. I remembered this room from looking Kata down at the maze. I knew the way out from here, without help from Pete, as long as I could avoid... Oh, dear me, almost forgot the reset lever, Ramoon chuckled merrily. The maze shuddered around me, hinges squealed, sprockets shifted, and, with a great wooden clacketing, the walls sprang apart and slammed together. Porticos rotated and fell through slots. The floor opened like a trapdoor beneath me and dropped me, sprawling into a shadowy chamber. Ramoon's contraption was even more impressive than I had realized. With a flick of a lever, he could switch all the walls around. I was now in the middle of a totally new and unfamiliar maze. Behind me, I heard the clatter of racing hooves and a moist whinny of anticipation. And that's the end of chapter 14.